je dois parler tout le monde en français. De ce moment au futur. This is my French friend, Francine. She has now convinced me to give the rest of all my introductions in French.
It would make it more
So, no, that's true. She didn't say that. I just made that up.
Never the truth.
She convinced me without trying. But I really much prefer speaking French. But as you know, I really am tempted to give some of these introductions a little bit in French. But I am the co-MC, and you know, co-MCs don't get as much appreciation as they should. And if I may speak objectively. So, as you know, my goal in life up till now has been to tell you strange facts. One of which was contradicted by one of the storytellers who came up to me and said, according to Law and Order. Law and Order, the TV show, Law and Order, you know, there's a TV show called Law and Order. According to them, identical twins do have the same fingerprints. But anyway, you come up to me later and contradict me. I remembered one more strange fact. Thought I was out. Earlobes have no function.
Holding up your glasses.
What's that?
Holding up your glasses.
Is that your lobe?
They're for nibbling.
Nibbling?
Yes. Very functional.
What? I didn't expect to be so quickly contradicted.
You're on the Irish side now. Gillen, that's correct, yeah.
Was it Listowel?
Listowel.
Listowel.
Yeah.
Listowel. Okay, so now I'm up to the actual introduction. Maria Gillen. Well, maybe co-MCs do get more appreciation than I expected. Marie Gillen est un conte parleur de 4e génération. What's that? Wow.
Bravo.
Yeah, some people are really getting this. Maria Gillen.
Encore une fois. Encore une fois.
Ah, merci. Et aussi dramathérapeute de le County Cork. Elle donne des mythes traditionnels aux...
Et je suis une maîtresse de danse irlandaise à Jonathan chaque année.
Even the sound man is smiling. Okay, I feel guilty not telling you the real truth. Maria Gillen is a 4th generation Irish storyteller, as you know from my French, and drama therapist from County Cork. She brings traditional myths and folklore to audience contemporaine, from festival stages to boardrooms. Currently storyteller in residence at Sheehan's Storytelling Cottage. She previously held posts at the Kerry Writers Museum and with Colette Travel from 2022 to 2025, sharing Irish heritage with thousands of international visitors, an award-winning performer featured at international festivals. Maria also curated the Listowel. the Stoll International Storytelling Festival, a prize winner at national storytelling competitions. She is also a regular voice on Cork City Community Radio. With an MA in drama therapy, training as a biodynamic therapist, and 22 years in European operations management, Maria bridges tradition, therapy, and leadership, helping communities and organizations alike find renewal through story.
I tell you, I never sounded so good in all my life. Thank you, Sparrow.
Yeah, merci. You know, Jim Brule, his name is French. Jim Brule. Son nom est français. Il est respecté parleur de l'histoire. Doula de mortalité.
Okay.
Brule is a respected transformational storyteller, death doula, and teacher. Death doula quieted the audience. And teacher with diverse cultural, spiritual, and academic backgrounds. He holds master's degree in family and systems therapy and artificial intelligence. Yeah, that I didn't see coming. That was one of the things I was going to say to you, is like, hey, we're real human beings here for once. Jim's workshops address healing, multicultural wisdom, and end-of-life themes. His school, Transformational Storytelling, trains spiritual storytellers from multiple traditions and is accredited by the National Storytelling Network. There's all these organizations one never knew existed. He is the recipient of the Oracle Storytelling Award for Leadership and Service. I think that's given by an artificial intelligence. From now on, the show is just me giving introductions. That's it.
Yeah, we noticed.
I better just stop there. Anyway, let's hear it for Maria and Jim.
So, you know, a lot of times when you're a storyteller, you worry about whose story you're going to have to follow. But never have I had to worry about following the MC. And so, just as a really brief introduction, Maria and I have known each other for several years. We've worked online side by side, but it was earlier this year that we met for the first time in person in Marrakesh at the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival, where there were 100 storytellers speaking 20 languages, and we told stories and did workshops for a week.
And we set a Guinness World Record.
We set a Guinness World Record for the longest oral storytelling, which was over 80 hours long. So yeah, so, pardon me?
Just wait till next year.
We'll talk about that. But anyway, so I just, you know, this is a real treat for me and Maria to be able to be on the same stage at the same time, doing stories together. We each have a pair of stories to share. We'll go back and forth, and then if there's a little time, we'll take a little bit of reaction from you all. The first story I'm going to tell, some of you may know, I'll give you the name, it's Tatterhood. Who here knows the story Tatterhood? A few do, okay. Mostly those I associate with. Tatterhood is a story that's traveled a little bit, but it's Norwegian in its base. You know, a lot of times we hear a story about a king and queen, and the king is flawed. In this case, the king and the queen were marvelous rulers of their kingdom. They cared for their subjects, they cared for each other. The land flourished until the grief that fell on them being childless started to fall on the kingdom. And the grief in their hearts spread. And the crops were not as strong, and the animals started to grow thin, and the rain didn't fall the way it used to. And the whole court knew that something had to be done, but what could they do? And someone had the wonderful idea, why don't they adopt a child? How often have you heard that? Why don't you adopt a child? And so they said yes. And they went out and they searched and they found this young girl whose joy and whose love filled their hearts a little. And they brought her into their family, and she was so full of joy and life that she was dancing up and down the halls of the castle. And sure enough, things started to brighten. And day followed week, followed month, and sure enough, that sadness lifted more and more. Now one day, the young girl went out outside of the castle wall, but still in view of her mother, and started throwing a ball into the forest. And she would run in and chase it and bring it back. And then one time she threw the ball into the forest and it came back to her. She picked up the ball and she threw it again, and sure enough, back came the ball. And so, being a clever young girl, she would throw it a little less each time, until finally the other child emerged from the forest. This was the first friend she had had. And they started playing ball back and forth, back and forth. Now, to her, there was nothing unusual about this girl. But to the mother, the queen, looking out from the window, she noticed she was dressed in rags. She didn't seem to be cultured. And in fact, she would have called her a gypsy. And the mother was very, very frightened, and she called to her daughter, "Come in, come in, come in." And the daughter, being innocent, came in and brought her friend with her. And her mother said to the young gypsy girl, "We don't want you here. You can go now." And the gypsy girl looked at her and said, "I see the sadness on you. And I know what can be done." And the queen said, "What do you mean? What sadness are you talking about? You can't have children, can you? My mother can cure that. If you'll just bring her in, she'll be able to cure you." And the queen said, "That's ridiculous, that's absurd. But go ahead, why don't you try?" And so the young girl ran out and back into the forest and came pulling her reluctant mother with her back up to the queen. And she said to the queen, "Yes, I can cure you, but I'm not sure you'll be willing to do this." And the queen said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, tonight you need to take your royal bed and move it to the back of the stables, where it's the smelliest and dirtiest. And you need to take your bath water after you've bathed and pour it beneath the bed, making it muddy and even smellier. And if you and the king will have sex tonight in that bed above that filth, then in the morning you'll see 2 flowers blossoming beneath the bed. Eat one of them and you'll have a child. But whatever you do, don't eat 2. Well, the queen pretended that she wasn't going to try it, but of course she did. And she had the servants move the bed into the back of the stable, and the bath water was poured there. And the king and the queen had quite a night, we'll say that. And the next morning, sure enough, she got down on her hands and knees in the mud and the muck, and she looked, and there were 2 flowers blossoming. And she tasted one, and it was the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced. It raced through her. Oh, how could I only eat one? And she did. She ate both. Time passes. How long? You know how long. 9 months later, she's in her bedroom. She has her servants there, her midwives taking care of her. She's going through a difficult labor, as if every labor isn't difficult. And she's moaning and groaning, and finally, after a great effort, out comes a daughter, riding a goat, with a spoon in her hand and a caul over her face. Everyone screamed. Who can imagine such a thing? And yet here's this newborn infant riding a goat around the room, waving her wooden spoon. But it wasn't over, because she was having a second child. And this child, another daughter, was the most beautiful little baby that you can imagine. And the midwife said, well, let's just get rid of the other one. Who wants to see that? And they grabbed the daughter and the goat, and they tried to take her out of the room, and the other sisters started to scream, for they were connected. And so they tended to both babies, and they washed them, and they brought in the king, who I don't even know how he dealt with it, but his wife had, so he did too. And they started to grow up together. And that connection got stronger and stronger. They would play with each other, they would race around. Every now and then they'd think of trying to lock up the first girl into a room so that nobody had to look at her, but her sister would scream. And you know what they called the girl on the goat with the wooden spoon. It was Tatterhood, because it looked like she had a tattered hood over her face that never left. Time went by, and they were in the royal chambers. And it was late at night. And suddenly there was a storm like they had never heard before, and the shutters which they closed were banging and clanging, and they heard terrible sounds from outside. And both girls said to their mother, "What is that? What is going on?" And the queen said, "Oh, it's those witches. Pay them no mind. They're out there partying. They'll be gone by morning." But it got louder and worse, and they couldn't take it. And Tatterhood said, "You know what? I'll drive them away." And the queen said, "No, those are witches. I'll drive them away." And without another word, she headed towards the door, still on her goat, of course, and she looked back and she said, "Whatever you do, don't open the window." Why is this always the way it works? But she went out and she rode her goat and she's striking them with this big wooden ladle, and they hear the sounds of the fighting and the smashing, and one of them flies against one of the shutters and it breaks open, and her sister looks out of the window. She pokes her head out just to see what's going on. And one of the witches flies up and takes her head and tears it off and puts a cow head in its place. This is from Norway. We have different rules there. And the Tatterhood finally comes back up, and she sees her sister running around on all fours with a cow's head mooing. And she realizes what's happened. And she says, "You know what? I'll get her head back." And she goes to her father, the king, and she says, "Give me a boat, and I will sail, and I will get the head back." And the king says, "I will send soldiers with you and guards." And, No, I'll go by myself. I'll just take my sister with the cow head, the moo head, and we'll take care of it ourselves. And so they sail and they sail and they sail, and they come to the dwelling of the witches who live on the edges of the fjords, of the cliffs. And she says to her sister, "Wait down below." And she gets on her goat and she scrambles up the edge, and she sees her sister's head in one of the windows. She grabs the head, races down back to the boat. The witches see her and they start to chase her, but she fights them off again, and she takes off the cow's head and puts her sister's head back in place, and they say, "We're okay now." Many stories would end at this point. But they said, "You know what? Let's go on an adventure together." And so instead of returning home, they keep sailing. And whenever they're sailing, it's only Tatterhood who's on deck. The sister is down below. And a galleon comes by. And they see this very strange thing, this large boat being captained by only one person. And they draw up to have a look. And they see this frankly ugly person there managing this boat. And they're astounded. And they say, "Who are you and what are you doing? Are you there all by yourself?" And she said, "No, I've got my sister with me, but she's even uglier than I am. You don't want to see her." They said, oh, yeah, we want to see her. Boy, uglier than you? Yeah. And she said, I will only show her to your king. So the galleon returns to its kingdom and comes back with the king and his young, let's just say challenged son. And they escort him onto the deck. And up comes the sister. And she is so beautiful. And the king says, will you marry me? And the sister says, well, yeah. And Tatterhood says, no, not unless I get to marry your son. And the king says, all right, works for me. And the son says, I'm not marrying that. And he said, yes, you are. And so they make their way to land. And the king and her sister go riding in the front, so ready for their wedding nuptials. And behind them is Tatterhood on her goat, and the reluctant prince beside her. And he's just in deadly silence. He doesn't know what he's gotten into, and he certainly isn't happy about it. And finally she says to him, you know what? You're so quiet. Why are you so quiet? Talk to me. He says, I don't know what to say. She says, well, you could ask me why I'm riding this strange goat. He says, okay, why are you riding the goat? She says, I don't see any goat. I see a fine stallion. And he looks down, and sure enough, he sees a fine stallion. But he's still silent, and she says, come on, ask me another question. He says, I don't know what to ask. Well, why are you carrying that strange spoon? She says, spoon? I don't see a spoon. I see a beautiful scepter. And he looks and, yeah, he sees the scepter. Why don't you ask me about these rags that I wear? Well, yeah, why are you wearing those rags? She says, I don't see any rags. And he looks, and she's dressed in the most beautiful of gowns. Why don't you ask me about this hood that I wear? And he says, okay, why do you wear that hood? And she says, I don't see a hood. I see a beautiful crown. And he sees the crown. And at that moment, it's time for them to turn into the palace and have their nuptials. And Tatterhood says to him, you know, now that you see me for what I really am, I don't need to marry you. And she turns her horse and she leaves for her next adventure.
Brule, wow, very good. So, before I start this story, I have to tell you that there was a time in Ireland, if a baby was born and it was not baptized, if it died before it was baptized, it was not allowed to lie in sacred ground. And this caused grief to the mothers, and they made a workaround. We were constantly making workarounds until we grew up with it as a country. So I want you to know that before I tell you the story, because sometimes it's easier to say the unsayable in a story. There's a young fella lives by me hall. Me hall is under the impression he knows everything. He's at that age, do you know, when a fella thinks he knows everything. And his mother said to him, listen, Iha Hauna is coming up, and it's coming soon now. Samhain, the 31st of October, when the veil thins, when the ancestors can walk through it, the good ones and the bad ones. And she said to him, no, Michal, don't go out on the 31st of October. And he says, go out of that, ma'am. I don't believe in all that stuff at all. And I can tell you, as the child of an Irish storyteller, that I don't believe it during the daylight. But when the dark descends, I believe every word she's ever told me. And so it came the night of Halloween, when our famous Ciodriota, when our magical mist was rising up out of its bed in the River Lee and snaking its way up the 7 hills of Cork. And our old bowed Michal, he says to his mam, I'm off so, ma'am, don't wait up. Don't wait up for me. And she says, I will, boy, I'll be sitting here with my beads and I'll be praying for you until you come back. And as he walked out the garden patch, he was throwing the holy water after him. And he took his bicycle through the mist, and it had a kind of a yellowy light, a little bit like that light now. Do you know the way you kind of get a yellowness in the mist? And it was making its way through the drops of water, and as he was going along with his bike, he remembered all the crazy stories his mother told him about how at Collins's barracks, where the walls were so thick that you could hide a man inside them, 6 foot thick at least, these walls. Well, it was said that during the Ciodriota, especially at Iha Hauna, especially at Halloween, that if you were looking at them through the mist, that you might see heads and hands coming out through the wall to bring you back in with them. And as he was thinking about this, he put his hand up against his head like that so that he wouldn't have to worry about it. And his bicycle was in his other hand, and his shadow was up on the misty wall. And he came to Bell's Field. I wish ye could see it. Come to Ireland and come to Bell's Field. If you stand on Bell's Field on a sunny day and you look out, the whole of Cork City is spread before you. They call my city the City of Spires. And as the River Lee goes like a beautiful circlet of silver, you see all the different turrets along the banks. But on a misty night, on a night when it's dark, when all you can see is the yellowy mist, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like a different place entirely. And he was almost thinking to himself that he'd just turn the bike around and go home when he saw it coalescing out of the mist, melting back in, coalescing again. And he wanted to tear his eyes away, but he couldn't do it. And he told his legs to go home, but his legs started walking towards this entity. And when he got there, he saw that it was a man slightly taller than himself. But it was like a man from a different place, from a different time. And as he stood there looking at him, the man stepped out of the mist and became as solid as you or I. There was such grief in his face. And he had his hands held out. And as Michal took in the fact that he was dressed like no one he had ever seen, like photographs on his grandfather's wall, with the grandfather's shirt and the rough hands of a working man with the nails embedded. But past those fingertips, there was a butter box. And he remembered the stories of his mother, the butter box babies, and a cheesecloth covering the top of it. And even though he didn't want to do it, he knew that this man, this Taisha, this ghost, wanted him to lift that cloth. So he found himself lifting the cloth up and looking inside the box. And when he did, he saw the reason for that man's grief. For there lay a baby, a raw little baby, a baby that never had a chance at life. He dropped the cloth then, and the man turned and began to march down Bell's Field, down the Fever Hospital steps, into the ancient winding streets of Cork, up towards Shandoon, old Fort Shandon. And as he looked down Shandon's hill, 'twas like no Shandon he ever knew. Not a car on the road, no electric lights, a candle here or there in the window lighting the mist, a twitching curtain. And the man began to take off down the misty hill, and Micheál, not wanting to lose him at this stage, stepped in behind him. They took on the pace of a funeral march. Down and down the hill they went, until he knew the River Lee was not far away. The man turned left then, and Micheál thought, where is he going? He turned left into a graveyard, and as Micheál looked around, he said, my mother went crazy when this graveyard was mowed under, when they took all of the headstones away, when they made this place into a car park. How am I seeing a graveyard now? And with these thoughts in his head, the mist swirling around the headstones like so many broken teeth coming up through the mist, he saw the man find what he was looking for and begin to kneel in the mist. Micheál went over as fast as liquid to be beside this man, for he did not want to lose him in the mist. The man had found the fresh grave, and Micheál remembered from his mother's lips. When they put the butterbox baby into the graveyard, they had to find a grave that was new. They would lay the child at the feet of that person, and the two souls would hold hands and go to heaven together. Micheál knew what the man was doing. The man was beginning to dig the fresh earth with his bare hands. Micheál knelt beside him and began to help him. The man looked into his eyes with such gratitude that it made Micheál feel shamed that he hadn't decided to do it a bit earlier. When the little depression was big enough for the butter box, the man laid it in there with such tenderness, as if he was putting his child to bed for the last time. He covered it over, he patted the earth, and he began to sing in Anchang and Tria. He began to sing in the Irish language. Micheál, he thought that he had forgotten the prayer, but he joined him there. Arna hir, arna, gone for danum, godagaduriat, gone the haller and taller. Maranin arena, arna Tor doing enough, agus mar doing arviaga, maravami da fe huna fe. Is nalig shingi gahu, ag se shing. The man looked at him, and Micheál looked into his eyes, and they rose like one person from that misty earth. the mist began to fade, and as it did, the man began to melt and coalesce and melt, and he was gone. Mihal threw his bicycle down, and he ran out of that place, and he followed the mist back to its bed in the River Lee. And then he heard it. Beep, beep. And then he saw it, the 208 bus. Oh, and on him there, he said, thanks be to God and the Blessed Mother. He jumped on the bus, and he went home to his mother. And never again did he mock the shan nose, the old ways. Shine Mushkale, I hope you liked it.
Just a couple minutes. We're trying to get us caught up. Is there anyone who has a question or a thought they would like to share? It's hard to see, so. Yes, please.
So many young people today get their ideas from TikTok. But of course, those are also still stories. They're just very short stories. And I'm wondering if you feel that there's a problem with short stories, or do you feel that it's all kind of connected to the same tradition?
For me, I feel it's connected to the same tradition. And we would often have, if you were going along the road, you might say to somebody, are you coming to the session tonight? And they might say, I'm lukewarm about it. And you might say, well, did you hear the one about the leprechaun in the bog? And they might say, no. And then you'd say, I'll see you at the session. That's TikTok worthy, isn't it?
And I'll just say, yes, there's so many forms of story. And in one sense, the success of TikTok and these other short forms is that they tickle a part of our heart that needs attention. But without being at all egotistical, I don't think you could have heard any of these stories on TikTok. Thank you.
But I have, just on that, we've been looking at, that beautiful Native American story about we're all born with two wolves, a black wolf and a wolf and a white wolf, and who survives? The one you feed. So the storytellers have been talking about the internet is two wolves. Who is feeding it? So it's very important that we do put stories in where they can be found. And you can do that by YouTube, and then you can have YouTube shorts. And this is all brand new to a traditional teller, but I'm learning because we need to feed the wolf. Yeah. So, one last thing, because I get killed if I don't say it. I'm storyteller in residence for Finoog, a 300-year-old storytelling cottage in Ireland. You're all welcome. And you can find me on Facebook, thank you for mentioning this, and YouTube and TikTok and all the others through Story from Seeds. That's my personal one, or Sheehan's Storytelling Cottage. So Story from Seeds, please. Thank you.
Thank you.